Hi, I'm Eric.
And I'm Aurora,
This is the Family Retort. We're cousins. Most of the time, we agree on issues. Sometimes we don't.
and we'll fight at the dinner table so you don't have to.
So, we just watched In the Mouth of Madness, and this is for our Halloween month because Halloween is the only thing keeping Christmas at bay these days.
Hallelujah.
And we decided to watch a cult classic, In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter. This is one of my favorite horror films because it kind of is a love letter to H.P. Lovecraft. And Aurora has not said anything about this movie, so I'm assuming she's not a huge fan of it.
Well, I just wanted to take a nap. I'm sorry. It doesn't get to
Oh
me in any
no.
distinctive way, but I didn't want to say anything bad because it seemed to really like it, so I think we should go
Oh
into why
no.
you enjoyed it. I didn't want to poo-poo on your parade.
No, okay, that's fine. That's why we're here and that's why we have this. Okay. So, I particularly like horror films. If you didn't know that.
I
I
didn't.
love John Carpenter specifically. He is known for his body horror and grotesque creatures.
I do
Um,
actually like body horror. I thought that was the fun part.
you like the you liked it in this one, huh?
Well, I really liked when she turned into that creature, um,
Okay,
and like walked around like that. That was like the best part.
so getting the plot summary out of the way. Spoilers. It's been around forever. Too bad. Go watch it. Um, for the movie, it starts off with a insurance adjuster getting hired by this company to go find their best writing author. He's sold 1 billion copies, which, in comparison, Harry Potter is one of the best selling books of all time with 50 million copies. And this guy has sold 1 billion. So he is, in this universe, absolutely ginormous, specializing in horror. And they want this insurance guy to go find him because, well, he's their biggest selling author in the company. They're a pillar of the
And they need his book that he
yes.
hasn't given them the manuscript for, and they've delayed it. He's late.
So he's tasked with either paying out the insurance, but he has to investigate what's going on first. So he knows whether or not his company he's employed with should pay out this settlement. Well, he starts looking into the author. Some weird stuff starts happening, right? He gets attacked. First thing, he gets attacked. He thinks it's a little
By
weird.
the agent.
Yes, by the agent.
Oh, sorry. Was that like the
Well,
spoiler? Were we supposed to?
I already said spoiler alert, so again, this was made a while ago, so he gets attacked and then starts his investigation. Well, he notes some weird things going on around him. He just thinks it's all kind of a hoax, right? For the first part of the movie, he's like, this is all just BS. This is some sort of, you know, guy in rubber masks. He thinks it's a PR stunt by the publishing company in order to drum up
Well,
more
they established
publicity.
very early his character and the world that he lives in is this everything's a scam, everyone's out to get you, a very dog eat dog corporate culture world, which is very 90s, I think. I think that was really interesting and fun. It really reminds me of the 90s because you hear this phrase from the 90s of, oh, it's a dog eat dog world, everybody's got to go ahead, blah, 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 everybody's trying to scam, everybody's out to get you. And so he's from that world, right? Where
Kind of that
everything's a
mindset.
scam.
Yeah.
And he's very in that mindset. and he's in that mindset for the whole story, and do a very good job establishing that in the beginning of the movie, I feel like, because they have him do a bust of an insurance scam where somebody's trying to scam the insurance companies, and he has this great, like, well, here's your wife wearing these things that's in the merchandise that so and so bought down,
Yeah,
and here's your mistress wearing these things that was such and such burnt down, and that
that
was
was supposed to be
such,
burned down in the warehouse fire, quote unquote.
and it
Yeah,
was a very great t- deliverance, a really well done character intro. I feel like it really did ground the world building, it ground the character, it made it so well established so that in the twist, it it did feel like a twist. It, like, not really like a twist because it's a movie, but it it established that this is in the 90s cultural scam world. His mindset is still established in that.
got it. So he starts investigating this um, disappearance of this super popular author. He starts looking around, kind of like, well, where do we go? Where do I find him? And again, more weird stuff starts happening. Well, he notices that on all of his previous books, there's like a red outline. So he basically cuts up a bunch of books, and it's what the state of,
Delaware,
was it Delaware?
I think so.
Okay, we'll just have to cut this little part out. It was the state of Delaware. And then he goes to the publishing and he's like, look, the X marks the spot. We need to go right here. You go, okay, go with his editor, right? So they go and investigate it, and then weird stuff starts happening. And then the name of the place is Hobbs. Bing.
Sorry, that was me.
Was it? No.
That was my phone.
Okay. So the name of the place was Hobbs. So it was a town middle of nowhere, and the two of them start noticing because he's traveling with the editor, and she starts getting some weird stuff, even going into the town. And she's like, "I've been here. This was in his book. I've read it." And then his books start playing out in the town. And then it makes you think, well, did he write about the town? Is that influence? Or is it his writing is becoming the town? And then it kind of explores that, and it gets more and more and more intense. And then we finally meet him, the writer, and it's just absolute insanity goes from there.
It's about the the writer in this movie explains that he thought it was just fiction, but it was these unholy creatures from a different realm whispering to him and creating these into perfect, like, creating things into being. And there was this, because of the strength of the belief, because so many people believed in him, he was able to bring these creatures from that realm into this one. And that was his this insurance adjuster's guy's job, is to bring the manuscript into the world so that it can be spread.
Ah, so yes, when he finally meets the writer, Southern. Oh, hold on. I'm just looking up his name really quick. Southern Kane. So this writer, Sutter Kane, is writing these books, and he says that he's basically the conduit for these other beings, essentially. And he gives the manuscript to our insurance adjuster and says, your job is now to deliver this. And he basically says, "No, I'm not going to do this. This is insane. I have control of my own destiny," kind of thing. And this creepy door basically opens up, and he's doing exactly what is in the manuscript. So, like, line for line, beat for beat, he's doing exactly what's already written, meaning he's part of this story. He's part of the Mouth of Madness.
There was this really good part in the car when the main character, the insurance adjuster, and the editor woman were driving in the car. And this is before they even get to the Hobbs town. They are driving, and she says, he's like, "Oh, this is just fiction. It's just horror, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "Well, but a reality is just like what we believe. And we all believe that this is reality. Aren't you glad? Wouldn't it be so lonely if you were the only person who believed in a different reality? Wouldn't that be lonely?" And I felt like it was such very good foreshadowing about and a very good reflection on the nature of reality and a dissection of reality in this movie as well. Like, oh well, but what if Kane's reality became our reality? What would happen? And
Well,
that is something
yeah,
that she says in the car.
and at the ending, again, spoiler alert, he's losing his mind, right? Somebody delivers him the manuscript, and he goes, "Who did this?" And he burns it because he got rid of it after he got it the first time. Well, then he goes to the publishers again, and he's talking to the guy. And the publisher says, "What are you talking about? You delivered this a month ago. We've already made the movie. It's already been on book. It's already been for sale for 7 weeks now."
Right. But is he really losing his mind? I feel like in the beginning they try to give you that feeling, but in the end that was kind of like, or are you saying that the pandemic that they were talking about could have been something else and he was just thinking that it's due to this?
Mm, that is the real question now, isn't it? Is he actually going insane, or is it an actual like cosmic horror where something is breaking through the veil and taking over the world through infection of a book and movie?
I feel like that really preys on, there's always this fear of how media affects people, right? Like they always have this, oh, video games causes violence. Oh, this and that causes this. There was panic about jazz music causing risque behavior among teens way back when, right? We always have people blaming media. So sometimes I wondered during this movie if this was like a dissection of that or a reflection of that, in agreement or
Uh,
disagreements. Like I couldn't tell.
so this is more akin to H.P. Lovecraft universe, and there's a lot of like hints and different, I guess, kind of references in the actual movie to different H.P. Lovecraft properties. So, how should I explain this? So, some of the books that the Sutter Kane guy written, like the Hobbs End Horror, is an allegory to the Dunwich Horror.
Mm.
Another one of the books that was in the movie was Hotter Out of Time, which is the Hunter of Darkness and the Shadow Out of Time. Even the Asylum. So one of the things H.P. Lovecraft writes about is asylum and going insane because of, I don't know if you're familiar with cosmic horror.
I've heard of it, but do you want to elaborate on it a little bit more so I can be clear, a little bit
Yes.
more clear?
So let me pause for a second and let me look this up because I want to get this 100% accurate. All right. So cosmic horror, also referred to as Lovecraftian horror, is a subgenre of horror fiction. It is basically the horror of the unknowable and incomprehensible. So this kind of means like cosmic dread, danger of the unknown, madness, um, religion is another kind of topic that this touches on. It's kind of like a grandiose type thing. It's horror of the unknown is a really good way of putting it.
You know what I think is interesting is in this movie they talk about a contagion. There's this pandemic that's happening. And it reminds me a little bit of the COVID pandemic, right? Where there is something infecting people and
Hmm.
we know what it is, but people the it's too horrific for people to look at it directly and to confront it, so people would rather live in denial.
Hmm. Yeah, and like like I said,
And that's the same thing that happens in the movie, right?
yeah,
Where he says, "Oh, it's spread. This contagion is spread through the books, through this thing," and they're like, "Ah, oh, that's not it."
when it actually is in the context of the movie, of course.
In the context of this movie, it is right, and it's just fascinating to me because human beings are basically just ostriches.
Awesome. How so?
You know, don't we bury our head in the sand when it's just
Oh
too big,
yeah,
too complex? That because
yeah.
that's cosmic horror, right? Is it when something is unknowable and complex and something that it is just too much.
Well, and then here's where we're getting into that. It's after a point he does absolutely go insane because he knows what's going on, right? He is one of, I guess, the very, very few people who understands what the hell is going on. And yeah, he kills somebody at the end, but he also has been there since the beginning, essentially. And he goes, "No, I'm not
Well, I
insane.
thought it was
This is
extremely
actually,
cyclical because the agent also had the axe and was like that. So it
yep,
was just a very cyclical type of story
well, and he's technically not insane, but
within the
every
context of the story.
but everybody treats him as insane, of course, because they're like, "Oh, this book is causing everybody to riot, to go crazy, to murder people." I mean, if somebody told you that, you'd go, "Yeah, okay, right. You get the hell in the loony bin, right?"
Yes, I think it's interesting this fascination with the rise of violent crime, etc., etc., when violent crime has generally gone down for decades, right? But
Yeah.
there's this utter fascination we have with it.
Oh yeah.
So, what about this movie and Lovecraftian horror in general that really appeals to you?
I like the nature of the you cannot stop it kind of attitude. It's bigger than you. There's no out. You just need to lie down and accept the inevitable, if that makes sense. Um,
Mm.
I like Lovecraftian horror because of the, I guess, bigness of it, right?
Hmm.
Where,
That's an interesting.
yeah, where it's like these entities from who knows where are just, you just can't do anything about it. It's that kind of, you don't control your life, or you can't, no matter what you do, kind of horror where it's just, it kind of terrifies me, honestly.
Well, it's about this invading other, right?
maybe not so much the invasion, but the insanity of it, right? Where in Lovecraftian horror, one look at a being of, we'll say, the interdimensional beings, it, you go insane.
So is it the idea of knowing something fundamentally changes who you are?
Maybe not necessarily that, but just the. I think the point is the not being able to control your own destiny. No matter what you do, how much you try and fight it, you could try and warn people, but they'll just see you as a crazy person.
Interesting. Why?
Uh, I need to think about that. I almost need to pause and think about that. That's how much. Well,
We can pause. You can pause and we can think about that. I'm just curious because I have something else that appeals to me. And so to me this movie didn't hit my own existential dread and it doesn't hit my own body horror because I've already reckoned with not being able to control my own life. I've already reckoned with
fair.
an
That's fair though.
invading force taking over my body. And I've already reckoned with, like, you know, my joints popping out, like there is, this movie is such a pale imitation of life to me personally in those respects that it is not scary to me.
Fair enough.
My biggest
Well,
so what so so I'm curious about why those appeal to you because I can see that, like, I can see the appeal, but I'm just curious if
I
that makes sense.
no, I got you. I think it's just the loss of autonomy to such an extreme degree, and to know that everything you know is just gonna be toast too. That I like
Is
about the horror.
is it because you feel like you've lost autonomy in your life and you like seeing it reflected in fiction, or because you have autonomy in life and you want the escapism or the difference to experience through fiction?
Yeah, I think that's, like I said, it's horror, so it's supposed to frighten you, scare you, right? And when I think about that kind of horror, I also like the scale, if that makes sense.
Yes, because it's big, right?
It it's
The
it's
pandemic
it's
is
big,
a
it's
lot of little things that
huge.
we can't see, so it's not big. But the idea of Lovecraftian horror are these big creatures that are
that are
scary.
that are just beneath the surface, just waiting to come out, right? And
Hmm.
anybody who speaks up or is like, "Oh, there's that big monster with tentacles on their face," or in the example in this movie, there's something behind the surface that is starting to make people go crazy, right? It's the at any moment your whole existence could be just done, right?
So you enjoy the fear aspect about the loss of autonomy because your biggest fear is the loss of autonomy because you do have control over your life.
Yeah, we have, some control over our fates. Um, as, I mean, even as simple as, oh, what am I gonna have for lunch today, right?
Um, to some degree, yes. Although I'm like entirely reliant on my caregiver bringing me food, and she comes once a week. So it's I am like I don't have very much autonomy at all. I'm entirely reliant on how I can manipulate others in order to take care of me. And so to me, my biggest fear is not loss of autonomy because I have already lost autonomy. My biggest fear is like hurting others. So to me, it's more like, oh, becoming a monster, hurting other people. Those are the horror movies that get me more,
The
where
horror
it's
element.
like, yeah, those are the horror elements that
Hmm.
scare me more, where it's like, oh, you're turning into the monster. You have hurt people. You don't know what's happening to you. But it's not about some other creature happening to you. It's like you happening to other people, to me. Those are the horror elements that are more scary to me, which is why I personally wasn't as scared by this horror movie, but I did enjoy, like, I did think it was interesting to some degree. I just,
All right. So what? Let's go to the movie. What did you not particularly like about it? What were some of the things you're like, okay, this is kind of lame?
I thought that the character for the other lady was inconsistent, and I was kind of a little bit confused about why she was there sometimes. Like, is she like here as a foil? Is she here as an antagonist? Is she here like just for some representation? Like, why is she here?
Just some representation. Well, you gotta have a token
like
woman
I
in here.
yeah, I was just like, what is she here for? Because I just felt like her characterization was so inconsistent in so many ways, and I don't know, I just wasn't feeling her very much, and there were just a lot of it that I was just like, I thought that I
Uh oh.
thought that the the like facial deformities, I understood that there was a certain level of body horror in it, and there is like a trigger of disgust in it to
Yeah.
me, but I also understand that we as a society have a huge hatred of people who look different from us, and things like disabilities, disfigurements, being injured by things, facial deformities, all that kind of stuff. So it was one of those things where I know that my disgust is being played on in a way, and so it kind of is like hard for me to lean into it, if that makes sense.
So you're upset that it played upon our societal um
Stigmatisms,
tropes.
I think.
Oh,
Well, like I feel like it was more like stigmas, right? Like where it was just like it's not that, like, I understood why it was using these things that we already stigmatize, but it just kind of makes me roll my eyes. It's like, oh, schizophrenia is so scary. Oh, facial disfigurement, so scary. And
oh
it's just like,
gosh.
okay, sure, so scary. So, and I thought the like slithering creatures that remind of his insects, I was like, yes, that does trigger disgust in most humans. We are
Well,
innately grossed out by insects for some reason. I am not immune. I think insects are gross. They are slimy and creepy and crawly, and they don't look like humans, you know?
well, they are fundamentally a lot different than humans. Yes. I don't think
But
they're
I
that scary.
eh.
But
See, they trigger a real ick factor for me, but they do when they showed you all the monsters chasing him into the tunnel or whatever, I was like, it was better when they weren't showing you these unholy create abominations or whatever.
honestly, I think they could have done better with that. Just because I know John Carpenter was directing the film, and he is known for his kind of body horror. Uh, if you're familiar with the movie The Thing, the original one, that was
Nope.
also him. Oh my gosh. How can I relate these things to you when you don't have any idea what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Well,
What? Well, okay. So, how about you? Were there any parts of this movie that you're like, now that I'm rewatching it, it doesn't have as big of an impact as I was hoping for, or there are things that could be done better, or
I
even
don't think so.
things.
I really enjoyed this film. I like the like he's written in a book. He is part of this book, but the book's not out yet. And then it kind of feeds into itself where he's literally part of the movie. He is the movie that we're watching. It's very surreal meta kind of commentary
Hmm.
because you saw at the very end he was the only one left, right?
Yeah.
And then he goes and watches the movie, which is the movie we just watched.
Interesting.
So it's very cyclical in that nature. But it is a slow burn. It's
So
not
you
like
enjoy things that are meta too, as well.
yeah. Yeah, I think that was really clever. And like the part where he's waking up for his dream, at the very beginning, there's a cop like beating somebody, right? Beating the crap out of somebody that he sees.
Actually, I thought that was really an interesting part where you see a cop beating somebody up in an alley just in his normal life. And then he's going through the books and he has a dream of the cop, and then the cop faces him and he looks like kind of dead and deformed in a
Deformed,
way, with
yeah.
lacerations on his face. And then he wakes up, and then the cop is with the dead face and lacerations is right next to him. And then he wakes up again, and gives this great kind of jump scare. But I wonder a lot about this visual of police brutality.
All right, this is the 90s, all right? Keep that in mind. This is part of the 90s. Little different social context. Well, maybe
Is it
not a
though?
ton, but it is a very meta commentary. But like I
Well,
said,
also I think that how we view things changes as time changes,
yeah,
right?
true. This well, fun fact. So this didn't really do great at the box office. This
Like all
brought
cult classics.
yeah. I think it pretty much broke even or made a little bit less than the actual budget because of marketing, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how they factor it in. But since it's released, like most John Carpenter films, has been a lot more popular and has gained popularity. And one thing I appreciate is, like I said, it's kind of a love letter to H.P. Lovecraft, right? We talked a little bit about that. But the thing is, there isn't many movies that replicate that kind of writing and horror. Just because it is very difficult to replicate, if that makes sense.
Well, movies and books are such a very different experience. I think that books, because you have to read them, you really have to imagine it in your mind, and it also allows you to not fully visualize things to a degree. So it can gives you this kind of ambivalent, unformed horror in your own experience. They can give you more of the internal experience of the characters that you can experience in a movie to the same degree.
Yeah.
But there's also more visceral reactions in movies that you can't get from books.
Yeah. But where I think it does good as we'll say, a Lovecraftian horror movie, per se, translated from like a book. So Lovecraft doesn't directly like the monster is never the main antagonist, right? It's always somebody, something. We never really get to see it. It's always in the background, if that makes sense. And where, yeah, we do see some of the monsters in this, they did a good job of like keeping them far enough away, and you're kind of just watching this guy delve into insanity.
The monster is more atmospheric.
Yes,
But
it's
what
more.
is there an antagonist then?
I don't think there's any one antagonist. I think that's kind of what's interesting about this. I mean, you could make an argument, hey, the creepy monsters making the guy write the book are the antagonists. But we never
Well, but the
specifically.
author wanted to bring them into existence, so I would consider him the main antagonist. He chose to
Ah,
wrote this. He wanted to propagate this world. He wanted this.
but
He was very clearly very villain
there was a
there.
line that says, I thought I was writing these books, but all along it was them writing them, making me write it. So he's almost a victim himself.
Mm, mm,
You're like, I don't know about that.
well, because people can be conduits for their creativity, and there is this certain feeling that some creative people have where it's like, I don't know where this comes from. This comes from something other than me. And oftentimes there's this theory that, oh, it's from another dimension. I'm just seeing things from this other like it's just like a
Or a
play, right? Like,
muse. The muse
yeah,
is coming
the
through me and I'm just writing my inspiration.
the multiverse, mania, whatever. And so I but I think that there is a desire to create and share your work, and I think that, oh, these beings from another universe is just creating through me is just like such a cop out. I personally
What?
um
No,
uh
because it's like I said, it plays
even
into
if
that cosmic horror. That's I'm
that this guy is just a
he just
puppet.
yeah he's just a pawn in something bigger to the grand design of what's behind the veil, you could
I
say.
feel like there's this big context is that you have existed as part of the military and I have not. I am just somebody
I'm
who
just
has
a
spent
cog in the wheel.
well, you have experienced that kind of thing, right? Where you have experienced just being a person who doesn't have, who is at the whims of some bigger power, right?
Yeah,
A physical bigger power. And for me, I have more experience of having a like creative manic streak where I worked on something for a week and I didn't know where it came from, but I had to make it or else I was going to go crazy. And those are different experiences that we have. And I think it leads us to have very different views on what we consider the villain here.
well, it's all how we interpret the movie too. Uh,
True.
so,
Okay.
would you recommend this movie? Let's go from there. Would you recommend this to people as
I think
a
it depends on
let's go watch something on Halloween? What would you recommend?
oh, nah. It
No.
depends on like what people are like looking for, but since I personally didn't enjoy it and it's not like the scariest things I ever saw. Like if I wanted to recommend something scary, I would recommend Hereditary. And if I wanted to recommend like a fun Halloween movie, I'd be like, yeah, let's go watch like Hocus Pocus or some shit, you know? So to me, I I see where you're coming from because you enjoy Lovecraftian horror, but to me,
Yeah.
because this didn't hit any of my personal fear factors, it didn't have the same effect on me. And unless somebody really enjoyed cult classics or 90s movies or had any or a super interest in Lovecraftian horror or like really enjoyed meta movies or going insane or other things like that, like it just doesn't have that same appeal to
Appeal.
me. So, but
I
Sorry.
disagree. Again,
Well,
I think
clearly you
it's
made me watch this.
I like this movie a lot. I think it's a very underrated film. I I can see why not everybody likes it, and I understand. It just is just like meh. I I don't really care about this stuff. If
Right.
you do like the H.P. Lovecraft type stories and horror and the cosmic horror, this is right up your alley. If it's, if you like more blood, gore, slasher, probably not. It falls kind of in a weird category of not quite psychological horror, if that makes sense.
I appreciated that it was a good thriller. It had some level of psychological horror. I appreciated that it had some level of body horror, but it wasn't like too gory.
Yeah.
It wasn't too jump scare. It wasn't too tacky. I
So,
felt like it was a really well created craft. It just didn't psychologically hit me in ways that scare me. And I actually wanted to um explore that because you mentioned how H.P. Lovecraft is a racist before we began.
oh my
And I
gosh.
wonder if that difference in worldviews could be why it doesn't have the same
No, and
existential
and
dread to
we'll
me.
talk about the H.P. Lovecraft racist thing on the
Well, he has
one
this
where
like
we
fear
actually
of
talk.
this other, and there was this very like interesting quote during the time that he was locked up in the insane asylum where he was like the only person with this worldview, and he was he was like the only person, like everybody else was losing their humanity because of this change in worldview. And I just thought that that was such an interesting perspective to have. And I wondered if, because you do have this fear of the other. This is why you enjoy guns and stuff. You have this fear of invading. You
I
have been
mean,
robbed. This affects you. You have this experience
I
that is
mean,
different from mine.
I wouldn't. It's pushing it
It's
a
not
little bit, but I mean,
it's not in a racist way, but there is this
not no
fear of,
reasons. Oh my
well,
goodness.
but like you've been robbed, right? That affected you.
Not so overtly robbed, but
Oh,
yes,
you
I've
haven't
had
been
stuff
robbed at gunpoint?
stolen.
Oh. Huh.
I mean, I've had to pull a gun on somebody, yes, that was beating somebody up, but not quite robbed at
Mhm.
gunpoint. And let's hope it stays that way.
I don't know. Maybe it's your military training. I'm just gonna blame everything on the military now.
Yeah, okay. No.
But I don't know. I
I
just I wonder if that cosmic fear of some otherworldly thing that we don't understand and viewing that as scary.
I not
Because
I don't think
this
it's
there is
really
this
scary per se. I like it from a writing standpoint. I like it from a how should I explain this? So I like different properties, right? Different IPs, whatever you want to call them, because of how they world build. And I like the thought and just the idea of there is something bigger than you, bigger than, me, bigger than everything else lying underneath the surface that's just slumbering, right? And at any point could it just done. You're done for. It doesn't matter.
but when we're talking about horror, we have to talk about, are we scared of things we have already experienced to an amplified effect, or are we scared of things we haven't experienced? The fear of the unknown.
I would say more fear of the unknown, honestly.
See, and I'm scared of things that I've already experienced.
Huh.
So I just to like I'm not that scared of the unknown. You know, it's like, well, how many more things could there be?
Well, that's that's the freaky part. You don't know. That's exactly it. You don't know how many more there can be. There could be everything, all of them, everything.
Mm,
You're like, not really. That's not scary.
Maybe I just like lack imagination. Like apparently, if I raise my arm, I've been dislocating my shoulder my whole life. Like I didn't know that, and I just have been wrong. Like in every single way that I move my whole life. How much worse could it be?
Well,
Like,
what if you lift your arm off and then it teleports to another dimension and turns into a squid creature?
yeah, that would be the
That's
same.
terrifying.
No, it's not scary at all. That would be exactly the same as dislocating my
I,
shoulder.
I
To
don't know if
me,
that would be the same, but
to me, I feel the same. So I think it's just how we process things, right? Like to me, my imagination of like a physical feeling, the sensation I can get in horror is limited to things that I can experience and imagine. So I can't
you can't
my
imagine.
my visceral reactions are limited to things that I have experience with. I can imagine a lot of different things, but my body doesn't have a reaction to it, right? Versus for you, you can feel that fear of the unknown and it does elicit a certain horror response into you.
Yeah,
And
that's why I like some horror films where they don't give the monster away, right? It's the fear of you filling in the blanks that I appreciate more. So, especially with this movie, I feel like, yeah, they gave some of the stuff with it, but most of the time they kind of pulled back from that, and you're wondering if the narrator uh, is reliable or not.
I mean, not showing the monster is like the number one law of fear in horror
Well,
movies is
a
to
lot of
up
people
that anticipation for as long as possible.
don't do that.
Because the longer you do it, because if you show a monster too much, it either looks tacky, campy, or cuddly. So I do understand and agree with like suspense and those storytelling logistics.
Like, yeah, the laws of
And
horror
I think to you, right, horror that you've experienced is like, well, I've already experienced it, it's no big deal, right?
to some extent. Yeah.
Oh, this sounds like a fun conversation for later. So you enjoy this bigness and the fear of the unknown. And to me, it doesn't elicit the same visceral response just because we all have different ways we process things.
Got it.
I, j-
So, to
I,
wrap up, what would you recommend this film? Would you not recommend this? I know you kind of had some strong opinions about not really liking it.
you
Um,
know, I didn't love this movie. I didn't really elicit a huge like horror reaction from me, but when I learned more about the Lovecraftian source material, I've come to appreciate the storytelling that the movie
haha,
has.
there you have
However,
it.
I appreciate the craft that has come into it. I can see why it's a cult classic. And for people who are into this genre, I think it would be a good movie to look into. But it's not a movie that I would personally
S-
recommend.
So it's kind of like a niche thing, is what you're saying. So if you already like this kind of storytelling, if you like the Lovecraftian story, it's a decent movie to watch. But if you're kind of on the fence about it or not really a fan, best you stay away.
Well, even if you like very specific cult classics, right? If you're a person who's into cult classics or 90s movies, I think this would be something worth looking into. But anybody who's into this niche knows more than I do already.
And I recommend it for people, maybe even if you're not super into the Cthulhu mythos, but kind of like curious about it, and you don't want to spend the time reading all the books or even reading a few of the stories. Just watch this, and you'll kind of get a good idea of what a Cthulhu or Lovecraftian story is.
Oh, that's actually a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
So, all right. Well, that's it for this episode. We'll see you next time.
Thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion. Have good discussions and
Bye.
have fun with horror for
Yeah.
the rest of October.
We got all kinds of
You-
stuff this month.
Make sure to comment on any of your favorite cult classic movies that you think that we should like check out and maybe watch for future episodes. We
Yes. Recommendations.
because I have kind of hit a blockage on what movie I think we should be watching for to comment on it. And we want to hear your guys' thoughts on this movie as well.
All right. Bye.
Bye.